All right, well, welcome, gentlemen. Sarah, I appreciate you guys being here, taking time out of your Friday to be with me. Sometimes I wonder why me, and then I'm sure we've all had that thought one way or the other in our life. Why me? Whether it's good, whether it's bad. Quick introduction on myself, mainly for you. I've been here with the other folks before. Grew up in a very rugged, um, toxic environment in Ohio. If there was a racial slur or a gender slur, I knew it. It was expected. It was taught. And like I said, more than accepted, it was expected. Lost my dad when I was 12 to a drunk driver. Didn't think there was anything for me in Ohio. And when I left Ohio to join the military, I didn't know what I wanted to do. I just knew I wanted to be impactful and somehow be special. So I grew up in the volunteer fire department, didn't know you could get paid to be a firefighter until I became one later in life. Ended up in the military as a combat medic, was with the 31st MEU for a while, and I wanted to be the best medic for the best people. So I decided to be a medic with the SEAL team. Well, I didn't know that you couldn't just go be a medic with the SEALs. You actually had to go through buds. So that's the funny thing is I didn't actually want to be a SEAL. I wanted to be a medic for them, but I had to get through buds, and that had its own challenges I won't go into today. But having gotten through bugs and gotten into a SEAL platoon, that's when I realized the door kicking stuff was pretty fun. But it actually came at a price. Fast forward 15 years, multiple injuries, couldn't be a SEAL anymore, had to do something safer. I ended up becoming a firefighter, and I've been a 25-year firefighter now. And I've got 5 years left on that. But in the meantime, what I've done is I've taken all that trauma, all those experiences, multiple certifications and trainings, trauma informed training, became a life coach, life strategist for men, and I professionally run men's groups to help them promote healing for themselves, their families, their relationships. So that's a little bit into who I am and why I'm here. And like all of us, we met Sarah. She had an impact on us. We somehow had an impact on her, and that's why I'm here. So first, Sarah, I want to celebrate you again. Um, Without you, we wouldn't be here right now. And I know I am humbled and grateful to be here, to be able to participate in this and bring healing one way or the other. So my goal at the end of the day is to have profound impact one way or the other in your life to hopefully help you through something that might be happening. So that's why I'm here. And for today, I was thinking a lot about today. My story is the journey home. That's going to be the name of my book when it comes out. The making, breaking, and healing of a Navy SEAL and firefighter. And part of that journey is what we go into, then how we get out of it. I call it the journey back to yourself. So for today, part of that is I'd like to redefine strength today and what we think is strength, specifically in the male arena. And Hector, if you're able to come on audio or video and you want to participate, feel free, ask questions, whatever you would like to do as well. So for me, when it comes to strength, what I want to say is this: real strength doesn't mean silent. It means being sincere. So with that said, I want to share a story, and then I want to open up a question for you guys. When I was active duty military, I actually ended up holding one of my really dear friends in my arms while he died. He got shot in the chest twice, and as the medic, you're supposed to be able to save him, and I wasn't able to do that. And I remember being with him, and he was strong. He was quiet. He was silent. He was brave. He just stared at me in the eyes as I held his hand. I'd done everything I could. We had the bandages on. We were pressing. There's just sometimes you just can't. And this was one of those fucking times. And I remember holding his hand, and people say I watched him take his last breath. That's bullshit. You don't. You all you see is their eyes. But I felt it. I felt it. That's what I can say. And for the longest time, I carried that, and I didn't talk about it. I didn't carry it. It was mine to carry, and I felt I'd be doing a disservice to my heritage as a SEAL and the strength as a firefighter if I acknowledged the pain that came with that. And I remember working with one of my therapists, somatic therapist. Her name's Leslie Boyd, amazing. And I was sharing the story with her, and I learned the power of talking to people, even if they're not here. And she had me get down on the ground in the same position as if I was holding him. And I was on my knees. I had my arm behind him, holding the back of his neck and the base of his head, and holding his hand. She goes, "What are you thinking? What do you want to say?" And I just started talking to him. And man, the tears were coming. I mean, they were coming. And I felt like a literally blubbering idiot because they were coming. And I remember looking up, and she was a wreck as well. She was crying and losing her mind. But I had a conversation with Mark that day, and I was able to let him go. He's still with me. He always will be. But I was able to let him go. And I remember when I stood up and when I left there, I was so much lighter. The things we carry, right? There's a book about that called The Things We Carry. It's a Vietnam book, and it talks in there about how men would rather face death than be thought a coward. And I remember leaving there feeling so much lighter that how long had I been carrying alone what I didn't have to carry? Carrying it in silence. And that's what I'm saying, that strength is not silence. It's sincerity, it's community, it's camaraderie. And for those of us that have served, we understand the term the brotherhood. It's one step deeper than community. And with that, we're trained to equate strength with endurance, to suck it up, to keep moving, but the new definition of strength shouldn't be the resistance and the silence. It should be resilience and the ability to bend without breaking. We carry so much all the time, right? What do? We end up breaking, finding the bottom of the bottle, finding the closet, finding the foot of the bed or the corner. I know I've been there, and I'm not afraid to admit it. I've hit rock bottom, and I wish I could say there was only one rock bottom, but there's not. There's many. So it needs to be resilience, the ability to bend without breaking, to feel without falling or falling apart. So I want to propose that vulnerability is real valor, and emotional intelligence and resilience is elite training. What I learned from my time in the military, and I think everyone on here can attest to this, is I had gotten to the point where I wasn't afraid of dying anymore. I was afraid of living because I didn't know what the next day was going to bring. And I also realized the biggest thing I could have ever realized, and this was the damage I was doing to my own family. Just like when you go to the gym, you can't work out really hard and go, I want my left leg to get skinny. It doesn't work that way. Well, neither does emotional isolation. You can't turn off pain and suffering without turning off love and compassion. And I turned it all off, and I almost lost everything. Being strong isn't about being silent, it's about being vulnerable. Vulnerability has to become the new valor character that we have as men. So, with that said, I want to propose a question to you all. What would you say strength means to you now compared to, say, 10 years ago? And have you found that different definition yet?
I'll kick this off, Richard, and thanks for sharing that. And I know that's got to be some tough stuff you went through with that one. So for me, about 10 years ago, strength I would have considered, hey, uh, I can still hang with the young guys. I can still do the same thing I could, 10 years prior to that. I could also, I'm going to take a hit for the team. I'm going to take care of my troops, take care of my family. I was going to do all of the things that the work-life balance or rhythm calls for. And I felt, if I can do that and not complain about it or not, put myself out there and say, hey, I need to tap out or something, to me, that was weakness in the military. And I carried that into the civilian side of things. So I would say, 10 years down the road, 10 years now, I've been retired for 8, and I'm finally just now starting to go, okay, I don't have to have work-life balance. I have to have a work-life rhythm and start weaving things in and out, including the breaks where isolation, like you said, is a bad thing, but in small doses, I think it's necessary. And I think sometimes strength just requires you to say, hey, I'm going to shut the world out for about 10 minutes, maybe a day, and just be Ira or be Richard or be Sarah and just, okay, sometimes just sit there and zone out and recharge subconsciously. And I think the real strength in that is knowing when you can do that before you get to that breaking point, right? Where I quit drinking 11 months ago. And then there's times where it's like, oh man, I'm so stressed out. Maybe, it's maybe one. Then I'm like, no. So, before you get to that point, or before you get to the point where you're snapping at your kids or road rage or anything like that. So I think the inner strength is drawn from sometimes just shutting down, but being sincere about it. Like I'm not isolating because I'm depressed or anything. I just need to be me for 20 minutes, maybe a day, and move on. And being sincere about it. Just saying, hey, I'm getting to that point. I got to step away. And that 10 years ago, that would have never happened. It would have been like, hey, like you said, Rich, suck it up, Buttercup. You're a senior NCO in the United States military. Deal with it. Um, and that helped no one, So, yeah, huge difference in a decade. So, great question, Rich. I really that's really thought provoking right there. Thank you.
I You'll learn something about me, Ira. I was the king of superficiality. How's the kid? How's the dog? How's the weather?
Hmm.
There's no connection there, and it's lonely. So um, I don't know how to be anything other than deep
Yeah.
anymore.
Oh yeah.
So when we talk, my hope is that somebody, including myself, feels something. And thank you for what you said, and I appreciate your vulnerability there, buddy.
Anytime, man. Anytime.
Rand, I see you took yourself off mute. Did you have something you wanted to share?
Well, you certainly triggered a lot of introspection, I guess you could say. I was afraid I was a coward. You used the word coward. And it's a long time ago, but I did see a lot of men die. A lot of them were trying to kill me. It's pretty easy to fight back when somebody's trying to kill you. And I don't know. I was on a very bad mission. We knew it was going to be bad unless we were really lucky. And I stabbed a man with my bayonet because I had 2 bullets left. We kind of knew when we went out if it got bad, we were going to be in really big trouble because it was monsoon and the radios didn't work, no air support, no nothing. And we were so far out that we weren't even going to be able to call them if the radio did work. And I stabbed him with my bayonet because I was trying to figure out if I was going to commit suicide, what I was going to do with the last 2 bullets. Was I going to commit suicide? Because I knew I was a coward, Richard. I knew it. I knew if I was captured and they were coming right at me, that I was gonna, I just, and I ended up using those last 2 bullets, and I was a coward. I ran. I wouldn't be here today if I hadn't run. And it took a while, but I finally took a couple days actually to hook back up with the Marines, but that's a whole nother story. But anyway, so I could, you just triggered all that in my head. And then I come back from Vietnam and somehow I just soldiered up, man. I thought my strength was me. I was convinced there was no God. I felt like the men that were dying around me that were good men, my Marines, my tribe were better than me, you know. And yet I survived. So I don't know, for a long time I didn't have a God. And then in the end, alcohol. Alcohol was the one thing that I could not find a way to beat. I just couldn't beat it. Once I took that first drink, it got me every single time after a while. For a long time, it wasn't a real problem. I drank too much on occasion, but I didn't lose control. And I would quit for months at a time sometimes. But in the end, it got me. And so a little over 10 years ago, I just wanted to die. I had accomplished all these things throughout my life, and yet I was totally helpless, vulnerable. You used the word vulnerability, totally vulnerable. I felt like I was 5 years old. I couldn't do anything. And then a God that I didn't believe in put me in the arms of a man who knew how to stay sober, and he taught me how to do that. And my whole life changed, and I made a connection with a higher power. And that gave me the strength to turn my whole life around. So at 68 years old, I was at the very worst moment of my entire life as far as just wanting to die and killing myself with booze and not knowing that I had the best chance at that moment. I didn't realize it till much later. That was my best chance to get better, right? Because it was so bad. And I was totally vulnerable and I just gave up and I turned it over to higher power that I didn't believe in for a long time. And then I saw miracles start to happen. And then my brother's wife died, and he's grieving beyond belief. He still has some spirituality in him, but he doesn't understand well, God didn't do anything, but why she had a stroke. And then for 6 years, it got worse, never got better. And he took care of her, and then he thought he was okay. And then she passed. And at 71 years old, he says, I'm going to hike the Appalachian Trail. What the hell? No, that's not sanity. That's insane, bro. And we did it. What the hell? How does that happen? One step at a time. But I had a higher power that wanted me to do certain things and then to share the experience so I could help others. So I really related to what you said. Some of it's kind of, you know, ballsy, right? To admit to our strengths and our weaknesses, I guess. But I
You
don't know.
know,
So anyway, I don't know. I've never met Hector. I hope maybe this can relate to him somehow, perhaps. I don't know.
yeah. Um, what if our weaknesses weren't away our strengths? What if our weaknesses are what keep us in touch with our true soul and our true essence sometimes? But what I want to say to you is you said something there, Rand, and I just want to witness you in what you said. First, I'm so grateful you're here and I've gotten to know you. You are one hell of a man, and I see your heart, your character, and your spirit every time I get a chance to talk with you. And you said that you were a coward and you ran. I'd like you to redefine maybe what being a coward may or may not be, or redefine what strength may or may not be, because you survived and you're here and you accomplished many more things and many more lives were probably saved because you survived. There's a difference between, in my opinion, being a fool or being foolish, being a coward and being strong and surviving. But when we're in that moment and we're in the swamp, as I call it, right? Um, I remember, everyone here see the movie Schindler's List. Remember the scene with the little kid in the fucking outhouse that they were trying to save? and just covered in literally that world of shit. I cannot tell you how many times I felt like that little kid
Hmm.
that we can't see when you're in the swamp, all you feel and see is the swamp. So that sense of cowardness came from what? From you're trying to survive and live when others have died. You know, choosing to survive is strength. Choosing to be here to fight another day is strength. So my hope and prayer is that you can find a way to reevaluate that and give yourself some true grace and compassion for your strong will to survive and do more with your life.
Hmm. Yeah.
And I mean that.
Yeah, no, I think I have done that in large measure. So, yeah, I appreciate what you just said. Thank you.
Absolutely. That's what a lot of us forget to give people in our life is true grace and true mercy. And who do we forget to give it to the most? Ourself. I was having a conversation with a fellow coach of mine, and we were talking about how it was kind of ironic that I was feeling like I was having imposter syndrome. Anyone relate? Right? You know, what do I have to offer kind of thing. And her reflection was really neat. She goes, what's funny is we're all like Batman. We walk around with all these tools on this wonderful belt, and we use them all to save everybody else. And we never grab the right tool to save ourselves, you know? And that's the goal of these talks, is to hopefully allow that to happen. I don't know, Jim or Hector, if I don't know what all you've heard, if you have a share or not. If not, then I'll keep going. All right. So my next question is going to be
I'm,
for this.
I'm trying to unmute. Sorry.
Oh, that's okay, friend. Go ahead.
Um, yeah, so it's interesting listening to, what's been said so far. I was, when I quit my job, quote unquote retired, um, I went through this process of, um, feeling like I had let everybody down, because I was the leader that folded and, um, walked away from my career and, that kind of thing. Um, and that was, roughly 5 years ago. But what I discovered following that, um, was the strength in what I had done and what I was then able to, sort out for myself, that what I had done was the right thing. And that because of my background, etc., I had something that was significant to be able to share with others and help them, work through their resilience, in order to be successful and overcome those challenges as they come up throughout their careers. And I kind of went. I have a master's degree in organizational leadership, and I used to tell people, I'll never stand here and give you a class on leadership because it's not what I do. But now that's what I do, and I work with people regularly on leadership development, and I think it's uh, that's the gift, the power that I have now, or the strength that I have now, is to be able to share that experience, um, and help people develop their own resilience in their environment as leaders.
I love that. And, I like the way you started that share, because I wanted to go back to something Ira said in the beginning. You retired and you went through the period of what would have been the end of leave. So I'm assuming it was either the 2 week or the 30-day post deployment leave. And it was, what's next? Wait a minute, I have to be going somewhere. I have to be going back to work. And I know for all of us here, the thing for me, and I heard somebody, I don't remember, I might have been Neil Armstrong. I heard an interview. I don't know who it was, but it was somebody that had walked on the moon, an astronaut. And the quote that I heard was, well, what do you do after you've walked on the moon? You're not going to go get a job at Chase Bank. You know what I mean? I know when with the fire department, when I was mentoring all the new probationary firefighters, I'd be like, well, what are you going to do if you don't make it here? Are you going to are you going to quit and go count somebody else's money at Chase Bank? I mean, what are you going to do? And so I knew when I got out of the military that I had to do something profound and impactful and kind of continue that service. And to both Jim and you, Ira, there's a book called Younger Next Year that my son-in-law's dad gave me at a barbecue a year ago. And it talks about the next stage of life, the next third. We've had the third before we go into our career, then we've had the third, which is our career, and then it's that third, the next third. And they quoted one of the longest running ever Harvard studies in that book. And I mean, they started following these people like in the 70s, and they tracked them from like the age of 20 all the way to like the age of 70. I mean, they tracked them for the longest time. And at the end, they asked them, what has been the most meaningful thing in your life? I mean, what has kept you alive and happiest the most? None of them said money. None of them said, even really purpose, passion. They all said it was relationships. It was family. It was relationships. And, in another book that I'm working on is called VALUESHIP. The very opening part of it says we're social creatures. We wither and die on the level of our social engagement. And it was so profound to me that, and I mean, there were millionaires in there, and there were, iron workers in there. It's all these people in the various walks of life. It was the longest study ever conducted, and they all had the same answer. It was about connection. It was about relationship. And post 9/11, the survivors that lost people in 9/11 all said the same thing, that it was the power of conversation, community, and relationship that continued to give them hope and the strength to get up every day. So I know how you feel, Jim, when you quit your job, and you mean retired, and Ira after the deployment phase. I remember I had to make an emotional decision, um, and I know most of you can understand what I'm saying. I was only a SEAL for 15 years, been a firefighter for 25. I got 5 more left, right? What do I identify the most as? Being a SEAL. They've both been as impactful, but trauma bonding is one of the most incredible things and one of the most crippling things you can have. And in a high stakes environment like being a SEAL, being downrange, Rand, I can't even imagine, right? Those trauma bonds last forever, and they can be crippling. And I remember when I was leaving the military, because I could no longer be a SEAL, major injuries. I could barely walk. I've had a hip replacement, a knee replacement, 2 shoulder reconstructions. I'm a big guy, and I got beat up. I remember the guys, they were saying it in fun, but they meant it partly. They're calling me a quitter, for getting out. And I had to realize that I wasn't really walking away from anything. I was walking towards something. And I think that's where, again, redefining strength can come from, realizing what you're walking towards as opposed to what you're walking away from. Rand, had you not survived, ran away, as you put it, or ran towards something else, you wouldn't be here and having the impact in the lives that you have. Ira, you wouldn't be doing your Bravo Mission Radio. Jim, you wouldn't be doing the leadership. You know, we wouldn't be doing what we're doing right now had we not realized that we were going into something not even better, just different, in addition to, you know, but that's one of the power of what we're doing here and creating that community, that conversation to help give us that bond, you know. So I have another question for you guys. And that this includes you too, Sarah, by all means, you know, the questions are for you as well. You don't get off the hook here. All right. Um, when was the first time that you realized being strong had a cost?
I have a thought on that one.
Please.
When I learned that my dad took his life, um, I definitely reached out, like connected with people. I started a book club, just for other women so that we could kind of work through hard things together. That was really helpful, but it took me a decade to own it. It took me a decade to say, yeah, that's what happened to my dad. That's I lost my dad to suicide. Um, yeah, and then you are open to everybody's opinion about a death by suicide. And it took me that long to feel like I was ready to get whatever was coming once I chose to be vulnerable. So I feel like that was kind of a big day of courage. I said, all right, you know, um, I'm ready not just to tell my safe people, but I was ready to just own it and say, okay, what can I do with this to help other people that are suffering in silence? Whether it's the disenfranchised grief of having a story that society doesn't really want to hear. There's certain things that you can grieve that are okay. Like if you lose a child to cancer, these horrible, that's a very tough thing. But also losing a child to suicide is also a very tough thing. But there's some things that you're not really supposed to share as much. And so I was able to use that once I decided to own my journey, then I could use my story to help other people.
That's so powerful. Thank you. Thank you. And that's one of the reasons suicide is so near and dear to my heart. I've told you this before. I've now lost 9 people in the last 3 years um, to that, and it's a different grief. It is a completely different grief, you know, and our grief gets clouded by our other emotions because it was a suicide. So thank you for sharing that and the courage of sharing that with us right now.
So when I was active duty for 2 years, uh, part of my job was to move and coordinate the transfer ceremonies and dignified transfers of uh, the fallen angels, the human remains from downrange, from worldwide, really. And there, sometimes you would, and this is at the height of both wars. Plus, on top of that, you had people just stationed overseas or whatever that had passed away that needed to be moved. So, but mainly it was the troops that were downrange that you were learning their names, learning, you know, you're learning their next of kin, you're learning so much about them. And all you're doing is coordinating for them to get on a jet and be transferred back to the States to Dover Air Force Base. Um, and I thought, oh, you know, I can do this. This is a great day of, you know, just moving these guys along, getting them home. Uh, and the cost of that was, oh, I'm strong enough. And then you see faces in the paper that you realize the names. Air Force Times, Stars and Stripes. Um, there was one day I had to move 13 sets of human remains, and it took me 12 hours to coordinate all of it. And at the end of that day, I was so emotionally exhausted. And I thought, oh, you know, I don't need to bring this up to the family, or the wife and the kids, or, you know, my dad or anyone. Um, and then about 3 days later, lo and behold, Stars and Stripes came out, and all 13 service members were on there, plus some that I recognized their names from other missions from that month. And I carried that for a long time, a long time. That whole 2 years really did a number on me. And then, you know, the physical part of there was a lot of times I would be the one moving the transfer cases of the fallen heroes. And at the time, you kind of shut your mind out, like, hey, this is a job. I'm out here in front of, you know, sometimes there would be families watching us download a jet at Ramstein, you know, to transfer to another, you know, aircraft to go to Dover, and the family would be there. And you know, you had to hold it in. You had to, again, the whole suck it up kind of thing, just because you had to be strong for everyone else. And that to me, it was always, well, all I did was coordinate, or all I did was move. And I kind of felt I had to be strong because it wasn't that big of a thing. I wasn't, you know, all I did was know their names and sometimes their faces. But I think being strong and saying that's all I did for these guys kind of came back to bite me in the butt when years later I started having nightmares, and talking with my counselor there at Ramstein. And he was like, you know, what do you consist of? And I said, it's just these motionless shapes moving around. And I get this feeling like they're mad at me for something. And it took several dozen visits after that to kind of finally, and he was like, dude, you never dealt with probably the most traumatic part of your military career, which was, you know, honorably moving the dead, but still, you're still moving, you know, these fallen guys and gals. And it really took a thing on me because I minimized it. And it still to this day, there's a lot of times when um, I read about that day that there was, you know, 13 of those folks I had to move. Every once in a while, it'll pop up, and you know, it gets me down. But I've dealt with that little piece of trauma from that little piece of my career, but it cost me quite a bit. You know, some dark demons would come up from that, and you know, it would be even worse if I was in the middle of a bender or whatever. um, I think sometimes when we minimize our service, what we do to show that, it's no big deal. It's just, you know, what I do on a daily basis. You know, that's I'm in the military. I'm supposed to be able to hack it. I think by minimizing that, we show strength to no one really, but not even ourselves. Like you can almost sit back and go, hey, no, you need to deal with this. So that was what mine was, and again, it was just I minimized it, and so I never really dealt with it.
Yeah, yeah. Man, brother, that's hitting my heart like a sledgehammer. And I mean that. It's hitting my heart like a sledgehammer. Um, it reminds me of it's going to be hard, but I'm just going to say it. You weren't just somebody that where'd you go? Hand went up. You weren't just somebody that all I did is transport, move. I want to share with you what my wife told me about Mark, and that is this, Ira. You were everything to them. I don't want to say that again. You were everything to them. They weren't alone. They didn't fall in vain. They weren't forgotten. You were there for them for their transition, as I was with Mark. She said the best gift I could ever been was to be there holding his hand, that he wasn't alone, that he had company, that he had companionship, that he had love. So you were everything to them. And I hope that you can embrace that.
I've never looked at it from that angle, Rich. I've always dealt with it on my end. I never took that kind of lens and shifted it around to kind of say, hey, these guys probably appreciated the lift home, in a
Yeah.
timely manner. So thank
And
you. That's a great perspective. Thank you.
you were everything to their family.
Yeah.
Everything to their family. It's going to sound like a weird term to use right now, but you kept them safe on the way home.
Yeah.
So the biggest damage we do is we minimize what we do.
Yeah.
Exactly, Rand. You gave them dignity. So I just want you to be able to own that. Because what happens is I didn't realize I had as big of a problem as I did until I got into the fire service, and this is why. And I know that Jim can attest to this: exhaustion. When you're in the back seat of the fire engine or the front seat of the fire engine, I think you get more emotionally exhausted in the front seat than the back seat, right, Jim? You know, but when you work a 96-hour shift and you haven't slept and you're exhausted, that's when the voices would start talking.
Mm-hmm.
When you're on a 7-day patrol, that's when the voice and you're exhausted, that's when the voices start talking. Or when you're in the bottom of the bottle, that's when the voices start talking. There's a very tragic statistic that 90% of statistics are made up on the spot, right?
Mm-hmm.
But an overwhelming majority of people who leave us via suicide were under the influence of something. Because it allowed them the ability to be in a different emotional state to do what they've done. And that's one of the problems with substances, but you were everything to them. And I just want you to be able to own that, my friend.
Thank you, sir. Appreciate it. Like I said, I've never looked at it from that other side of the fence. So yeah, that's pretty powerful, man. Thank you.
Mm-hmm. Jim, Mr. Linden.
So I think the minimizing of what we do is significantly damaging, and I spent my career doing that, right? It's when people would thank us for whatever we did, it was very common for us to just sort of discount it, right? It's just part of the job. It's what we do, that type of thing. And throughout my career, there was a lot of stuff that I did that I think was sort of over and above, and but I always discounted it as it's just my job, right? It's just what I do. Whether that was, I mean, I had at one point I did something crazy and ended up in the city manager's office for a while, working as the assistant and the acting city manager. And during that part of my tenure, I had a public works employee die on the job. And it was interesting, because that organization doesn't deal with that. They don't have trauma in their job regularly, and that kind of stuff. And so, I kind of took the point on navigating that, and people kept saying, "Oh, that you did such a great," and I discounted it all. It was just like, yeah, it's just what we do. It's not. There was nothing extraordinary about it. And I went through a lot, throughout my career when, whether people were attacking me publicly for some of the stuff I had done, the stand I took on some things, or whatever. I just continued to discount it, and it wasn't until later, that I found the strength of, no, those were like significant things, and I needed to acknowledge. I needed to have a better way to acknowledge people's thanks, for the services we did, for them. And now, I even now I struggle still, when my neighbors thank me for something, for helping them out. It's like, it's just what I do, right? It's one of those things. And I think I think we need to find better ways to really, frankly, pat ourselves on the back a little bit, or be able to accept, that type of praise or thanks from people. Because without that, I think you end up sort of floundering in it.
Yeah, absolutely. And I don't know what song it came from, but might have been might have been from the movie Frozen. Let It Land. And my wife will say something to me sometimes, or somebody will offer some gratitude or a compliment, and I'll brush it off. And Paula will grab my hand or my arm, and she'll look at me and she'd be like, let it land. Just let it fucking land. you know um that was amazing, that whatever odd stroke of fate put you there, because that person that passed probably wouldn't have had the same celebration of life that they had with you being there. You know what I mean, Jim? So it was a big thing. And this is something for us all. I heard this the other day, and this applies to all of us, and what we do, and what we do now, and the power of story, Sarah, seriously, which is very few people have engaged in life like I have. I want us all to think of this as ourself. This isn't just Richard. I want you all to think of this as yourself. Very few people have engaged in life like you have, like I have, like we have. We have the right and the responsibility to share it. I think might have been Ed Milet I heard say this, and it was really powerful. He said, it's not your story, it's your experience. It's the world's story. So go share it. Period. I was just talking to my wife about this at breakfast, and the imposter syndrome and the fear of stepping into what I want to do and where I want to be. Is we've all heard the saying, haters gotta hate, right? Why do we say haters gotta hate instead of lovers gotta love? Right? It's that we have a 10 times greater affinity towards negativity than we do anything else. And that's where we fricking go. And the bottom line is this, is 30% of the people that see me or hear me or read my book or hear me speak are going to hate me. 30% are going to love me. The other 30% are the ones that are undecided. And that's where we have the most impact in our life, is the people are never going to follow you no matter what you do. People are going to follow you no matter what you do. It's the other people that are on the fence about their own morality, their own safety, their own spirit, soul, strength, survivability, those are the ones that we have the ability to help lift up and lift out or transform their life. Jim, you do leadership. I do corporate leadership as well. How many times there's people that show up to your trainings that are never going to use a damn thing you say, right? It's called mandatory fun. Remember that saying in the military? Um, so the bottom line is, it's funny is I had lieutenant captains on the fire service that are always talking about, I'm going to this next leadership thing. I got this next leadership book. And I don't know if you ever knew Captain slash Chief Larry Hutchison from San Diego, one of the first black female captains and chiefs on the job. And I told her one day, I go, Cap, you're not the one that needs to go to these seminars and read these books. Could you beat the other captains in the head with them and get them to go? You know what I mean? So yeah, it's the people in the middle that we're going to have the greatest influence on. And we got to remember that we have lived our life like nobody else. And we have a right and a responsibility to share that for others.
So the the program that I work with, we actually require the participants when they complete the program at the seventh month, basically, they have to stand in front of the group and give a 10 to 12-minute talk about their journey and what they want their legacy to be and what they're doing to work towards that. So we really try to encourage people to do that. And as part of that, because the best we can do is model the behavior. When we facilitate, we have a different guest facilitator each month that they're there in the program. And so the guest facilitator, has to get up and tell their story, tell their journey. And so I had the opportunity to do that just on Wednesday up in Orange County for several of the agencies up there. And, I've come to realize that the power of standing in front of that group and sharing that, it's not, as you said, it's not necessarily the curriculum that they're going to remember or use potentially, but they do remember the impactful story that you tell about the journey that you've taken to get to where you are.
Yep. Rand, you were going to say something, friend?
Yeah, no, I could really relate to that and what you were saying. And you were talking about the strength and then the repercussions. It's funny because I was telling a story I would never have been able to tell until a couple years ago. And when I came back and I finally got out of the Marine Corps and transitioned, I actually had this thought. I'm married, I got a couple kids, I put them to bed at night, I'm working 3 jobs, I'm in college, and I'm thinking, you are the luckiest son of a gun, because I didn't seem to have any repercussions from the war. I'm really, really busy. I only sleep about 4 or 5 hours a day, but my life was pretty good. And then one night, I had a nightmare that was so real, I actually voided my bed. And it was that I was in a battle in Vietnam, and I had not had any war nightmares before this. So it's like 3 or 4 years after I came back. And I'm sitting on the ground and I'm trying to put my guts back in because I just got sliced open with a bayonet, right? And I did survive that. Now, and then my wife, I thought it was real. I was screaming and my wife crawled across the floor and flipped up the light switch and all of a sudden I'm bathed in light and I opened my eyes and I'm not in Vietnam. I'm not in the middle I could smell the gun smoke. How the hell does that happen? And then and I'm not covered in blood, I'm covered in sweat. And I am smelling manure and urine because I avoided the damn bed. And I remember looking at, you were talking about, the results, the consequences of our strength, right? And I remember looking at my wife and she's looking at me. Her eyes are like saucers, and mine probably were too. And we just both knew this was not good. This was really, really bad, you know. And then from that point on, I was afflicted with nightmares. That one came back, oh my God, I can't tell you how many times. And then a couple other ones that were just similar. And then I used alcohol to medicate at night. I would drink my brains out just before I went to bed, so I didn't have the dreams. And I could still just sleep 4 or 5 hours and wake up and I'd be okay and I'd go to work and I'd be fine. You know what I mean? But anyway, I don't think I've ever considered what you said about strength, your strength becoming, I don't know how you said it exactly, but then the consequences or the problem.
Right.
Yeah, and I'm like, oh, I don't know. I was fairly strong most of the time. I don't have any Oh, wait a minute. And that's what popped back in my head. I don't think I ever really connected it before. I don't know. Maybe I have, but I don't
Yeah.
recall that.
Yeah.
So anyway, thank you.
No, and I mean, thank you. I mean, thank all of you. Goodness gracious. I had two more questions that I wanted to go through. If you guys got a few more minutes.
Actually, Richard, I have to go, family commitment, but I'm gonna take this pause real quick to say, hey, fantastic group. I'm so glad I got to jump in with both feet with this team right here. Sarah sent me the whole list of everything that's popping off, each week. I'm gonna be wherever I can get in, work-life rhythm, right? So,
Right.
thank you again, Sarah. Thank you for connecting with me and leading me here. Richard, awesome presentation, awesome class. And as always, if you guys want to connect, LinkedIn, Facebook, however you want to do it, if you guys need anything, just, hey, I want to vent, always reach out. Through the power of the cell phone, we're always in touch. So I got to go roll and do a thing for the parade here in town. But
Do you do you have time to write down three questions to take with you?
yeah, I do. Hmm?
This was what the parting thought I was going to leave everybody left, so you can write it down now and get it out of the way.
Yeah.
In the next 6 to 12 months, what do you truly want to accomplish,
Mm.
and why? What will that give you? What person do you need to become to accomplish it? And what self-limiting belief about yourself do you need to address and let go of to become that person?
Awesome.
Yeah, those are great. I got to go too, but you know what?
All right, that's fine.
There's a lot right there. You might want to do that as another whole session, really.
Yeah, well, and it's funny when I do my men's groups, that's usually the very first session. Why are you here? What do you want to accomplish in the next 10 weeks? You know, but we're talking about strength, and I felt that that was really fitting today. And you know what, Rand, we might do that. We might spend a whole hour just as a workshop instead of a conversation, doing a workshop on that.
Yeah, no, those are really good, but I could see that would take some time.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I do have to go too. I'm sorry, but
No, that's great. We can go ahead and call it then. Ira, have a great day. Thanks for being here, friend.
Oh yeah. Yeah, I'll
Nice
see
to
you
meet
guys
you.
whenever we're popping off with some stuff. I'll try and stick my head in the door at least.
All right, same here.
All right, you guys have a great day now. Bye.
All
you
right.
too. Bye-bye.
I
Richard, this was fantastic. Excuse me. Let's see.